is happening, you guys? Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast, where we are here to help you be happy, healthy, wealthy, and get better every single day. I'm excited for this conversation because we're going to be talking about things that might trigger you a little bit. And we're going to be talking about some really polarizing subjects, but I'm telling you, this is going to be amazing. TaChelle Lawson is the author of Black is Not a Credential, an award-winning strategist and a speaker redefining diversity as a profit driver. She equips CEOs with strategies for growth, reputation, and retention. TaChelle is also the founder of FIG Strategy and Consulting, a trusted agency of brands like Mercedes-Benz and Coca-Cola. Well, TaChelle, I'm excited to have you on. We're going to be talking about leadership. We're going to be talking about, diversity and inclusion. So this is going to be a fascinating conversation. How are you doing today? Good to see you.
Likewise, I'm doing pretty good. It's been an okay week post Thanksgiving, so I'm still working off my obsessive overeating of the sides and the turkey and all the things. It's been a good couple days.
Well, it sounds like you celebrated Thanksgiving the way you should and just completely stuffed yourself, as all of us typically do.
Yeah.
Tell me, the book title alone, you and I were talking off air, and I'm like, all right, that, Black is Not a Credential. I was like, where are we going with this? What does this mean? So I just got to ask straight away, how did you come up with this title, and what was the motivation behind writing this book?
All right, so this is going to be kind of a long-winded response, but I promise I'll land this plane. Black is Not a Credential came about my frustration with the way that diversity, equity, and inclusion has been implemented within corporate spaces. That's the long and short of it. I'm not sure if you remember what happened earlier this year. Actually, it was probably late last year, with the 3 presidents that were required to testify before Congress because of what was happening on their campuses. One of them happened to be Dr. Claudine Gay, the former president of Harvard University. Essentially what happened was there was a lot of anti-Semitism that was taking place on these 3 campuses. They were called into Congress and asked, basically, do you condone this behavior? The response, from my perspective, was inadequate. And it was, well, it's freedom of speech, and that's not a leadership response. The leadership response, and the only appropriate response, in my opinion, was we absolutely don't support or condone hate speech. We don't condone violence. We don't condone the promotion of anything of the sort. That was a leadership response. The response that she gave and the others gave was a hard no. But what happened, which tends to happen way too often, is that the Black president was immediately victimized. Look at how these white people are treating her. This is only happening because she's Black. And it literally had nothing to do with her skin color. The problem was the lack of leadership. And so my response was, yeah, no. We can't ask for equality, equity, being able to elevate to these positions and then have the bar lowered or removed when we fail to meet those standards. And the pushback was, this is only happening because she's a Black woman. It's actually not. It's also not an excuse, right? And so that was kind of my eyes opening into, this is a much greater problem, in the sense of we're pushing this narrative of equality and, we need to make sure that we have more opportunities for people of color and diversity, et cetera, but then not necessarily maintaining those standards because of the skin color, which is bullshit. Full stop, it's not okay. So that's kind of where the journey started. I wasn't sure what I was going to do in terms of writing a book at that time, but some kind of a fire was lit. I was very much like, this is not how leadership is supposed to go. The standard is not lowered or raised because of skin color. But that's exactly what's been happening from the diversity perspective. Fast forward to the presidential election, and I start getting these text messages and DMs from people inviting me to calls for Vice President Kamala Harris. And these people didn't know my political affiliation or my beliefs. And so I asked one of them, why are you inviting me to this? Because I knew why. The assumption was that because I'm a Black woman, I'm voting for her. And my question was, why are you inviting me? Is it because you want to share more, etc.? And the response was, you're a Black woman and so is she. And my immediate reaction was, Black is not a credential. And that's the book.
It is fascinating, this assumption that because you're this, you're going to vote this way, which, again, coming from a middle-aged white dude, I get it. I don't get discriminated against, perhaps, the way, so my wife is Asian, and perhaps she gets discriminated more. I know it happens in some places. I know because I've seen it. However, this idea that I'm going to immediately vote one certain way, or there is no meritocracy anymore, I'm just going to put somebody of a different, race or religion, or, that's why we're going to make this decision is
Right.
really silly too. So this is really, I think it's an important topic, but I do find it fascinating that, well, you're gonna vote this way because you are this color and you are a woman. And are we really still there? Like, I just don't want to believe that that's the way the world works, but I guess it does. I don't know. What was the response back? Is that, yeah, we assume that you're going to support her because that's what they said, essentially?
That's essentially, I mean, the conversation, the exchange got a little bit emotional and heated. I'm very opinionated. I do not pull any punches. After I made my statement, Black is not a credential, the response essentially was like, that's not what this is about. This is about us making sure that he doesn't get into office. Okay, that's still not a credential. That's still not enough of a reason. And I 100% agree with you. It's fascinating that we're still having this conversation. It's also incredibly disappointing that we're still having this conversation. I assert in the book, literally starts off with, we are obsessed with race in this country. We're obsessed with it. And it's very strange because our skin color is something none of us have any control over. We have no decision. We have just no decision in this. We come into this world, it's predetermined, yet we're so obsessed over it. And all of these assumptions are made. And it's mind-blowing to me in so many cases. And as a Black woman, I can say for sure, as we all can, there's no need to pretend that racism isn't real. It very much is. We know that, as is sexism, feminism. We know that. But if you and I have a disagreement, it is not automatically because of race. But that would be the assumption, right? JM is being this way. Look at how he treated TaChelle. He's a racist. Look at, and poor TaChelle. First of all, there's the assumption that I can't stand up for myself because I'm a Black person, or that I'm immediately oppressed or victimized, when in reality, we can just disagree. You can challenge my credentials or challenge my beliefs without it being about race.
Yeah. And you and I, again, off air, I said, where are you from? And to me, the reason I asked that is because culturally, I do believe we are from different. I was raised in Montana. And so culturally, there's certain things, small town, hard work ethic. Those are some of the assumptions. Now, that may not be true, but I think culturally, there are things that we have. That's the diversity. That's like, I don't give a shit what skin color you are. None of that matters to me. Are you a good person? Do you show up? And I love your response on, this isn't a leadership response. Hate speech in general is just not okay. What the hell are we talking about?
Yeah. Why are we debating that?
Yeah. And let's not justify, like, I think so. If you're reminding me now, was this the Palestine-Israeli conflict? Is that what they were talking? Okay.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And they're justifying our hate for them because of their hate for us. And I'm like, what in the world? Have we all taken crazy pills? Like, this is not okay.
Yes, there has been a blanket of crazy spray that has just been released across the US, and some of us were indoors and safe and some of us were not because it's just it's out of control. And again, when we start to think about judging a person based on race, and I'm starting to dig into this a lot more. There was this guy, not too long ago that made this really, really famous speech about judging a person by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. This is exactly what Dr. King's message was and what we were essentially striving for. And somehow the pendulum has just continued to swing in massive right or left directions, and we're not moving the needle forward. We're actually going in reverse and having, I think, even greater challenges around something that, again, we have no control over. But to your point, culture defines our behavior. So growing up in the Midwest, right, versus growing up in Las Vegas can guarantee that culturally there are going to be some things that are very, very distinctive for each of us. That is diversity. That's exactly it, right? Like we're going to show up to the exact same place with different perspectives simply based on how we were raised and the things that matter to us. But the narrative is that, well, whoa, you're a white guy. Like there's no way you have diversity. Well, that's not fair. And it's also not true.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I guess it's conditioned responses that ultimately we have. So, for instance, if you were to go see me out on a dance floor, people are going to say, dude, that 6'5" guy has soul. Like, I don't understand. Okay, cool. I understand what they're saying, but it's one of those things. It's like, it's this conditioned thing that you're not supposed to do this because you look this way. And that's when the racism, I think, gets so deep. It's like, why? Like, just because back in the, I don't know, well, before Dr. King, back in the 50s, there was a certain, like, you stay with your group and you stay with your group. Aren't we past all that? Like, come on. We want people to be included, right? This is what's been fascinating with this whole idea of, like, the transgender. I'm like, dude, if it makes you happy I'm fine with it. Do I think that a born male should be racing against females? No, I don't. But to me, that's common sense. And if some people, if they heard that right now, they're going to say that I am 100%. I'm transphobic for saying that. And it's like, no, I just don't think that's right. Just like I wouldn't want somebody to pick if two candidates are equal and one was, I don't know, Indian and one was, let's just say black. I don't want them to pick one to fill a quota, pick based on merit. That's the whole idea of what you're trying to say and really get across, right, TaChelle? I mean, that's what we're trying to arrive at.
Absolutely. Think of how disrespectful it is. The ultimate form of disrespect to choose me to fill one of your boxes. That is the ultimate form of disrespect. And where I grew up, respect is literally everything. And it's something that I focus a lot on because it doesn't matter whether you are a janitor, a small business owner, a CEO, every one of us wants and deserves to be treated with respect. And there is nothing respectful about being chosen to tick a box. Now, here's where I differ from a lot of, first of all, I'm not a DEI consultant. I'm a business strategist, and I talk about leadership. I don't have a problem with diversity as a strategic advantage. And what I mean by that is if you approach me and said, "Hey, TaChelle, listen, we have this new product or service that we're trying to introduce to the Black community. I don't understand the Black community. Here's what I'm thinking. Boom, boom, boom. I know that you have that in addition to your list of qualifications, in addition to the fact that you've accomplished this, you've done that, you've worked with Louis Vuitton, you've worked with, so how can you help me kind of solve this problem? You're treating me with respect. And you're also saying, hey, listen, I know I don't know this issue culturally, you do, but you're treating me like a professional.
Hmm.
And you're also not tokenizing me. And that's one of my bigger issues. And I think one of the challenges that we're seeing that's caused DEI to have a massive, massive mislabel. And that is that you're throwing me into this position to tick a box, but you're not telling me that you're ticking this box. So I think that I'm being hired as a professional. Meanwhile, you're ticking a box.
Hmm.
How is that respectful, right? And how does that benefit the organization as a whole? It doesn't. And so what I'm saying is, listen, understanding, I'll give you a quick example. There's a gentleman I was speaking to a couple weeks ago, white man, spent 20 years in prison. He's now doing outreach, and he's helping former prisoners transition back into civilian life. He has such a distinct understanding of what that transition is, from being an inmate to trying to readjust to civilian life. Do you think that because a lot of the former inmates that he's working with are Black and Hispanic, that I would be more qualified to solve this problem? Hell no. He can connect in a way that I can't even wrap my head around. And that's diversity. It's also showing respect. I think that part has been so fundamentally removed that it's not even funny. And that is the difference between woke, like you're mentioning of the transgender, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. You see, woke is based on emotions. So your statement about, I don't have an issue. I just don't necessarily think that men should compete in women's sports. Well, there's tons of biological data to support why that is a sound decision and judgment. But if you say it, the emotional response is, well, that's because you're hateful, so on and so forth. That's woke. That's not DEI. And that's what I struggle with. And that's part of why this book is so important, is because the two have been used interchangeably, and they're not. They're not the
Yeah,
same.
it really. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It really did come out at a good time, and I say that because, in large part, I think Kamala ran on I'm a woman and I'm a woman of color, right? And then there was I'm Indian, I'm Black. There was all sorts. And then when she didn't get elected, this is what really irritated me: is that people are like, "This country's not ready for a woman president." I call bullshit, man. I absolutely call shenanigans, because I don't think people are going, well, she just happens to, she happens to be a woman, so I'm not going to. No, they didn't vote for her based, I hope to God, on policy. Now, I want this to change. I do. I would love for, I don't care what kind of a female, I don't care. That's the thing. I want the best qualified candidate. Why
Most,
do we? Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. I'm sorry. No.
No,
It's like
no,
we put
I'm
people in
I'm just in full
boxes.
agreement with you.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're going to fit this box, so I'm going to vote for you. How fucking stupid is that?
Yeah. And insulting.
Yeah.
And
Um.
insulting.
So DEI, let's talk about that, because when you say that, I think there are emotions that have come across when that wasn't the purpose of why this movement, I don't know, is it a movement,
It's
this
a movement.
this
It's a movement.
idea was created. It was to say, to your point earlier, like, hey, I want to have, as a man, I love having a female's perspective when it comes to, oh, I don't know, fashion, or um even certain maternal things that maybe I lack as a male. I need it. And I think that's the idea with DEI, is that, hey, having different lenses is a good idea. Where did it kind of get screwed up? And not that it got screwed up, maybe that's the wrong term. Where has this, I don't know, feeling of, you say DEI and people are immediately like, oh, they're just picking somebody for this. I mean, you hear actually pretty frequently.
So, yeah, it did go off the rails. And I think that's more than fair to say. It did go off the rails. It was a knee-jerk reaction, if we're being very honest, right? It was a knee-jerk reaction to George Floyd being killed in 2020, right? Like that was the essential response. So overnight, The entire world saw what the Black community has been seeing forever. But there was a disproportionate treating of Black individuals by certain police. Now, I won't say all police. I grew up, something goes wrong, guess who I'm calling? The police. So, but we do know that there have been experiences like George Floyd's that have not received worldwide headlines, right? Like they didn't make the news. And if we weren't at home, thanks to COVID, it wouldn't have done that either. So what ended up happening was this situation was not one, it was one of hundreds of thousands of experiences. But this one was undeniable. And as a result, the voices got really, really loud, and it was no longer just the Black community that was asking, what the fuck is going on in this country, right? Like, what's happening? And so it was probably one of the rawest experiences I think any of us have actually gone through. And then trying to wrap our head around, how is this happening? And also, what are we going to do about it? So like you had all of these massive experiences taking place, right? Witnessing, trying to wrap your head around it. Like, why is this still happening? Holy shit, what are we going to do about it? And so the response was DEI. This was the solution to this massive problem. And that's part of the issue. Is the racial issue is so big. DEI itself is not the only solution, and it's not going to actually solve this problem because you have so many different perspectives of how it should be addressed. And I'll give you an example. I attended a summit earlier this year hosted by the NFL, or university presidents, activists, attorneys, and they were asked one question. What does equity mean to you? 10 different responses.
On the word equity.
On equity. Okay. So if we have 10 different responses, which one is right? How are we actually solving this problem if we don't even all have a solid understanding of what it means? So then you combine the E with diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion, we understand. It's the E that throws everybody off. And it's because there's not one solid definition that actually combines the D and the I. Add that to a bunch of emotional people who think that their experience or their family members' experience deserves restitution, deserves elevation, etc., and it goes off the rails. Instead of actually saying, okay, listen, we do have a problem. Here's what we can do as a corporation to solve this. The solution was not donating millions and billions of dollars to social justice issues and campaigns that don't align with the business. And that's why we're seeing these massive companies starting to back down from DEI. It's not because of the guy that's starting the movement on social media. No. It's not that. It's because it was implemented wrong to begin with. So you have that as one issue. And the other issue you have is there was no vetting, JM, like no vetting of who's coming into the company and leading these conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's where the credibility was completely destroyed. So now we're completely omitting the verification of credentials. Now my credential is that I'm Black. So I can walk in to your company and say, I want to teach a course or lead a training on DEI. And because I'm Black, you said yes. I have no training experience.
Truly vetting. Yeah.
No training experience, no leadership, no. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about my experiences. And I'm telling you, you need to tone it down on being white. You need to own your privilege. You need to own the fact that you're a white supremacist. You need to own all of these things. This was the standard DEI training. How is that going to give people the vibes that say, yes, let's have more of this?
Yeah. Now that you're saying that, I literally can picture a company. I won't say it out loud, but literally what you're describing is exactly what I saw. In fact, one of my best friends told me about he was doing this training. Now, again, Montana is where I'm from. That's where his company is. and he basically was saying how they were going to apologize for this white privilege. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? I said, here's the deal, man. Have you had privileges? Sure, I could get behind that. But how is that actually solving this challenge by saying, I apologize for my skin color? Again, what the hell? I didn't choose it. I was born and this is what I am. So the whole idea of DEI, I'm guessing, is we should probably have a group that is truly diverse, men, women, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. Like, you should have literally this representation, gay, straight. Like, that would be how we can solve this. And to truly say, look, you guys probably have some biases that you may even be unaware of, which, by the way, we all do.
We all do.
We all do, right? And to say that you don't is foolish, because again, I didn't know the Chinese culture at all before my wife and I got married, and now I learn still today, 20 some odd years. I'm like, that's a big culture thing.
Yeah.
That growing up in Montana, I had no idea. But it's just crazy to me to think. So I Have a Dream was what, almost 60 years ago now?
Over 60 years. Think about that.
Over 60 years. And yet this powerful speech that moved at least a big group of folks, and we really haven't made that much progress. That's kind of sad.
Think about it. We closed down banks, shut down government buildings to honor this man. We throw parades every single year across the country, yet we have completely disregarded his message. Think of how powerful that is. And it speaks to how performative diversity, equity, and inclusion has become. Dr. King's day is literal proof that this is just the way that we treat race and race relations in this country. And what's the most fascinating that you shared is that, yes, we do want to have people that are Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Middle Eastern, Muslim, Christian, whatever. But more than that, we want an actual representation of the communities we live in and the customers that we serve. That's what we want. And so when you go in and you just treat it like, oh wait, how many Asians? How many Black? I'm so much more than my skin color. And more importantly, you are assuming things about me simply based on my race. How do you know that I didn't spend my summers in Italy? How do you know I didn't grow up in Germany? Which some of my aunties did because my grandfather was in the military. Like, you don't, so culturally, you're making a lot of assumptions that you don't know for sure. Whereas instead of uniting on American culture, which is what I think both candidates, so to your earlier point about playing identity politics, they both did. I get it. As a strategist, I understand like why. It doesn't help though. It creates more division. And I think most of us in this country, we're just tired of it. Like, enough is enough. We need to get to some point where we're focusing on what connects us instead of what divides us. And at the end of the day, I don't care if my leader is male or female, Black or white. I do care that this person treats me with respect, is honest, and is trustworthy. Like, that's what I care about. I don't care about the others. And I think most of us feel that way.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. I agree with you. When I talk to, because I have friends of all over the map. Like, that's just the way, I mean, look, I grew up, I played basketball in college. So I was actually a bit of the outlier, if you will, in that and I got to learn a lot about different cultures from all over. Two of my roommates were from the deep South in Gulfport and Biloxi, Mississippi. I digress for a moment, but I guess the thought and what I'm really trying to figure out is, how do we get past this and get better? And that's really, as a strategist, as someone that works with these companies, how do we get better? Because you brought up the NFL. It wasn't long ago that I remember people saying, well, he's a Black quarterback. And I thought, how fucking stupid is this that you have to say he is this? I can see that. And do I really care what he is, what color he is, if he's winning games? And that's the whole thing. My company's called Let's Go Win. Do I really care how we win as long as it's ethical and moral? I don't. And I would rather be wrong and win than right and lose. And I see people all the time where it's like, I'm going to stand on this and say, nope, I'm going to be wrong and win, man. I'll show you. And I think that's where this hatred comes from. It's like, I don't know. I feel like I'm talking in circles on this because it's just so frustrating that we've still are at this point. So my question is, how do we get better, TaChelle? Like, how can we actually say, all right, hate is bad? I think everyone in the world, I would hope, can say hate is a bad thing. We probably shouldn't generalize. I understand sometimes we do, and we even preface it by saying, I'm generalizing for a moment, but I really care about the character, who you are, not the color of your skin, your race, your creed, your religion, any of that. So how do we get better? How are you seeing it in teams and companies that are starting to thrive, by having diverse cultures in their organization?
Well, I think it starts with accepting a very, very, I guess, kind of an ugly truth, and that is we're probably not going to solve this problem in our lifetime. Like, it's just, I think there's that reality. We struggle with race in this country. I think that that's not going to change. I really don't. I don't think it's going to change. I think it's something that we just need to get better at managing. And I know that seems like kind of pessimistic. I'm a realist. I think the reality is we continue to deal with this. And the way we manage it is we start by accepting what we can and what we can't control in our environments. In a corporation, which is why the book is designed for CEOs. The book is written directly for the C-suite to say, you have the complete authority to shut down all the nonsense and prioritize respect, qualifications, and impact. So if someone is not delivering value to the table, it's not racist to say that you're not welcome here or you don't fit. If this person is coming in and creating divisiveness and focusing on the fact that TaChelle is a Black woman and JM is a white man, that doesn't fit this culture. The CEO has the authority to say, we're not doing this. So the whole goal is to say, what type of a culture are we going to have here? And removing the DEI department or responsibilities from the human resources department. It should not be in HR. It is a leadership. It is a C-suite issue. It needs to stay there. The next thing we need to actually do is understand that social justice issues don't belong in corporations. They just don't. We can have things that we're passionate about, but it has to align with the business. I saw about a year ago, and it literally blew my mind, a corporation that developed a policy that allowed women to take time off during their menstrual cycle.
Wow.
This was considered a DEI issue. I can assure you that the last thing I want to do is text or email my male boss that my cycle has started and so I need time off. Like, why? That was some social justice warrior that suggested that women struggle during, newsflash, we've always struggled during that time. We still manage to function. These types of issues don't belong in corporations, right? And if it is at odds with your customer, with your core base, with who actually buys your product, there is a really, really good chance it's not good for the business. So leave it alone. Focus on what the purpose of the business is, which is to solve problems for customers. You're delivering some sort of a solution through a product or service that customers want. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be spoken to. I do want to be treated with respect. But when I walk into Starbucks, I don't need to see African flags. And I don't need that. I would like a cup of coffee, and I want the person serving it to me to treat me with respect and be kind. And that's what I want. And I want the coffee to be hot, and I want the coffee to be what I am expecting. I don't need a social justice lesson. And so taking it back to the business, focusing on the business, focusing on treating customers with respect, treating employees with respect, hiring based on qualifications, hiring based on fit, and delivering a consistent, fair product or service. That's it.
Yeah, the word respect obviously has come up many times, and here's again, it does kind of pay me to hear you say we're not going to solve it in our lifetime, because it's like, God dang, really, we've become a melting pot. Cannot people just get over this? But all right, I can go with that. And unfortunately, I
You
will
know
say
I'm
I'm
right.
kind of relegated to the fact that you're probably right.
You know I'm right.
I
Sadly.
know. Um, but it's interesting because human emotions, respect and kindness, that's not a color thing. That is
No.
a human thing, right? I
Yeah.
have been disrespected by males and females. I've been disrespected by uh blacks and whites. Like, and so it's so fascinating to me that we literally do. We put people in a box. And so I've said it on the show before, guys, labels are meant for boxes. They're not meant for people. So we can get clear on this. I want to ask you as a strategist, though, because I think it's been fascinating and not really very good for this particular company. Disney and the woke thing.
Mm.
Okay. Now, you talked about serving your demographic. And I mean, they have jettisoned, and you can see their numbers just plummet. Why would this company die on the sword on this issue when children are who you're serving? I found that absolutely fascinating. I'm not a strategist, but again, I do believe in common sense. That was really dumb.
It's stupid. It's
Like,
beyond stupid.
yeah. And this is a major company. So as a strategist, were you just sitting back dumbfounded and just going, who's behind the steering wheel on this one?
100%. Because Disney forgot the core message. And that is who actually pays for your service. So my niece might consume your products, but she only consumes it as long as I pay the bill. Right? So parents are your actual customers. Children are your audience. There's a huge difference. And for some reason, Disney forgot that. And it's interesting. Disney is one of the case studies I use in Black is Not a Credential of how not to do DEI. Like that is woke for sure. Diversity is fine. There are so many. Disney's core purpose is to create content that makes us happy, right? And is aspirational and takes us to this like far and far away land, and you have like your pretty princesses and so on and so forth, right? And I know people are gonna be like, it's true. That's what Disney has done. There is a way to create diversity without pushing it so far that you're alienating your customer, or worse, offending your customer. And I think that was something they weren't paying attention to. And I don't know why, because in every business, your numbers they speak for themselves. They tend to drive the direction. So Bob Iger, former president of Disney, when Black Panther, right before Black Panther was done, he pitched the idea. And the general response was, and think about it, that was what, 10 years ago. So not that long ago. Pitched the idea. The response was, people aren't ready to see an all Black cast. This is what he writes in his book. Yes, they're not ready for that. Basically, people don't want to watch a movie full of blacks, of a Black superhero, and so on and so forth. And he pushed back and said, I disagree. Why? Because the numbers supported his decision, that statement. It was one of the highest grossing movies ever. Like the Black Panther movie was like one of the best in the franchise, period.
It's a good movie. Who gives
It's a
a
great
shit?
movie.
Like, come on.
And
It's so crazy. Put out a good product. Like,
great product. And here's the thing. It's not just for Black audiences. It's a superhero movie, for goodness sakes. And so there's plenty of ways to tell these stories that resonate and represent diversity. But as soon as you start trampling, and that's or aspirational, right? Like superheroes are aspirational. As soon as you start trampling on people's personal beliefs and core values, that's a very, very different story. And Disney historically had been very good about not doing that. Why they adopted this very woke agenda, I don't know. But to your point, yeah, the numbers are showing their Disney Plus subscriptions are down, their downloads are down. The numbers are showing that this is not what people want. And so there has to be a shift at some point. Otherwise, they leave the door wide open for someone else to come in, right? Like Disney is a legacy brand, but it's not bulletproof. No company is. Remember Blockbuster?
Mm.
Not paying attention to what's happening it's a bad move.
These radical shifts where, since we're talking about movies, where everybody jumps on board that we're going to do, now it's all going to be like James Bond. Now James Bond was actually going to be a female. It's like,
No.
No, you can call her Sarah Bond for all I care, but James Bond is a character that's we know what James Bond is. That's where I think we get it all screwed up. It's like, don't do something just to say, yep, we're going to check this box off. That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
And I think that's where all of us go, no, this, like, fine if you want to create a character, like you said, so Black Panther was a black superhero. Fantastic. If you want to create Sarah Bond, which is not probably a great name, it'd probably be like Jenna Bond or I don't know, something awesome. But
yeah,
anyway,
cool.
You want to create a female Bond, I'm all for it. But don't say this is like, that's where I think people are like, that doesn't make sense to me at
Correct.
all.
And there used to be and let's be, I'm a huge James Bond fan. Roger Moore, don't get me started. Huge Bond fan. So James Bond isn't he is the character. The entire franchise is built on James Bond. So add another character, replacing it. You first have to ask, how does my current audience, James Bond fans, how do they feel about this shift? And that's where woke, again, is not DEI. DEI is inclusive of strategy. You are taking data and you are using that information to make a decision. Woke is saying we're just changing James Bond to Sarah Bond. Like, but what does your data say? Does the data say that that's a good move and that's what 90% of your audience wants? Because if so, then sure. Otherwise, you will see a flop, as Disney did with the new Star Wars movie, shifting some of the characters, introduce new characters. We love new characters, right? Like it can be a lot of fun. You don't replace the ones that are already beloved. Imagine if Mickey Mouse suddenly just changed. Like, okay, we're being real dumb. Yeah. Real dumb. Sorry. I'm just like,
no, it's, I mean, I could talk to you about this subject forever. I didn't really even talk to you about leadership, and you started with that, and I really should have, but you got me kind of fired up on this subject. So
good.
So let's talk about leadership. I'm going to go over time, and that's fine. When you've experienced, I'm guessing in your time, you've seen great leaders, you've seen poor leaders, and I'm guessing none of it had to do with them being, male or female or a certain skin color. If you were to say, you know what, my favorite leader, you don't have to name names, but what are some of the attributes that you saw that you're like, yes? Because again, the response when you started with the presidents, you didn't care that it was a male or a female speaking. You cared about what they said, the content of what they said, the way they stood up. So my question is, when you look at leadership, and maybe you can define what that means, but also what have you seen in terms of like, those are the attributes that great leaders possess?
So I think the core function of a leader is knowing what they're good at and what they're not. Right. So I can say for myself, I am a terrible admin. Excuse me. Terrible. I suck. Remember, offline, I was saying I was struggling setting up my microphone. Anything really simple, I struggle with. So those are things that I absolutely know I need to fill with someone who that's one of their strengths. So leaders are great at identifying people's core strengths and bringing that out. So instead of my bosses picking on the fact that I wasn't a good admin, they focused on the fact that I was an incredible negotiator, right? And that I was really good at strategy. And those were my best leaders. Like, nope, I want TaChelle to do this thing. We'll hire someone to do the thing that she sucks at, right? Like, we'll do this. But it's also about setting very, very clear expectations. And I think in terms of the number one responsibility of a leader is to make sure that everyone understands the game plan. This is what your role is, JM. This is what TaChelle's role is. And overall, this is the goal that we're striving for. One of the best pieces of leadership advice, and this has shaped my entire career, JM. I was 20 years old. I had just been promoted to assistant general manager, and I had a boss who was fantastic. Actually, I talk about this in the book. She was the kindest woman I'd ever met in my life. Again, I grew up in North Las Vegas. Respect was a big thing. And there was a time or an incident where my boss was covering the front desk for breaks or whatever. I'm walking up the hall, returning back to the front desk, and I hear yelling, right? And I'm like, what's going on? And I get there and there's these two customers yelling at my boss. And she just stood there very calm and composed and responded very calmly, very professionally. And I was like, what the fuck? Curse. I would have reacted so differently. And so when the customers left, I demanded to know why she allowed them to disrespect her and talk to her that way. And I just went off in my 20-year-old mind of like how I would have responded and how this should have done and so on and so forth. You should have threw that in her face and like all this ridiculous stuff, right?
Ego was talking, man.
Man, it was in control. And she listened. She never cut me off. She never dismissed me. And she listened and she said, TaChelle, if you can't control your emotions, you don't deserve to be a leader. Mic drop. At 20, no one had ever said anything like that to me before. But she took it a step further. She's a white woman from the South. And she says, as a Black woman, you have to be even more careful about controlling your emotions. Mm. And she wasn't being racist or anything like that. But it was something that, for me, again, where I grew up, being shown love is being told the truth. And no one had ever showed me so much love at that point professionally. And it changed how I led. My favorite boss was a complete hard ass. He didn't say good morning. He didn't say good afternoon. TaChelle, what are the numbers? How did we do? I looked at the report. Why are your sales down X, Y, or Z? He wasn't warm. He wasn't fuzzy. He was like Dr. House, like no bedside manner whatsoever. But he was fair and he was brilliant. And more importantly, I knew what was expected of me every single time. Everyone else hated his guts, thought he was the biggest asshole. He totally was. But he was fair. He was consistent. He always put me in positions where I was good at what I did. He wasn't putting me in administrative roles. We were putting TaChelle in charge of the Louis Vuitton Cup event because she's the best strategist and she can do this, then she can do this. That was it. He trusted me to run a $40 million event. This isn't someone that when he calls and asks, or when he calls, he's asking about my day. He wants to know why numbers are down. Mm. And I knew that. I respected it, and I was always prepared. And to me, that's good leadership.
You know what I love is that you had both the tyrant, if you will, and the really kind person, and both were great leaders. And I think that's the beauty of leadership is there's no stock standard way of doing it. However, there is, I heard very clear expectations and, holding your emotions. Gosh, I hope more people can do that. TaChelle, we have gone over, but I'm curious, anything I didn't ask you that is on your heart that you're like, I got to get this off before we finish up? And also, where can people find you, find Black is Not a Credential? Because this is obviously fascinating. I'm excited to read it because, I mean, it invokes something in me in a good way, but I want to have these conversations. I think we need to, so that we can somehow get rid of this shit before our lifetime. But you know what? That's for another time.
I think, listen, we could have this conversation another time about how we get rid of this in our lifetime. I don't see it happening, but I think we can make big moves. The only other thing I would like to say is the conversation that you and I just had is exactly what we should be doing. But more importantly, these small things that we can do on a daily basis to call things out. So, for example, if I hear someone call you homophobe for raising a point that is not homophobic, I can say something, right? Actually call this behavior out, and vice versa. It's about restoring balance, and in my mind, it's also about restoring common sense. Everything is not based in hate. I'm not trying to trigger any past incidents. I'm also not trying to minimize anyone's experience. I walk into TaChelle's shoes every day. No one else's, so I can't speak to other people's personal experiences. I would never want to diminish any of that. But we can call out the truth as we see it, right? And the truth as we know it. And so that would be the last thing that I would advise. And then I would also say, guard what matters. For business leaders, protect what matters. And that's the business, right? You do that or you risk everything. And look at companies like Bud Light, Disney, just guard what matters. Avoid the woke movement and just stay focused. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, TaChelle Lawson. Visit the TaChelle Lawson website. It's literally TaChelleLawson.com. And of course, Black is Not a Credential. It'll be available on January 14th on Amazon. But pre-sale will be starting in 2 weeks.
Awesome. Well, congrats. It's a lot of work writing a book, so well done.
Thank you.
I applaud anybody that is willing to see the project from start to finish, and I'm excited to check it out. Thank you so much for coming on and just talking about a really important issue, and I just really enjoyed it, man. It was a lot of fun.
Likewise. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Guys, look, she talked about a lot of really important things. I just think having these conversations is important. Hate is wrong at the end of the day. This is pretty simple. Hate is freaking wrong. And the more that we can have conversations and actually say, you know what, I didn't see it through your lens. Thank you. Thank you for educating me. Share this with someone you know and love, please, because this literally affects all of us. And I'm really glad we had this show. Until next time, remember your mindset matters. I appreciate y'all. Talk to you soon.